That's fine. That's plenty.
But it's red.
Oh.
That's working now.
Oh,
That's on
I'm back.
Shout out to Comcast.
Thanks, Comcast. I have several words for you, Comcast, that I can't say on stream.
We're gonna tax them.
Down with Comcast. Anyway.
Oh, I remember what it was. It was the idea of splitting the cooking types based on attribute.
Oh, right. Yeah, that was the whole thing that, like, formed the idea of, like, subclasses for the crafting.
I'm really excited for the crafting system. This
Oh,
is
me too.
so much fun.
I cannot wait to get that off the ground. I
have to go.
Yes. Well, thank you, Kadra, for tuning in, for chatting with me. Today may be a short stream. I may not go for more than another 15, 20 minutes.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I had a lot of fun. It's always fun to talk about homebrew.
Absolutely. Enjoy it fantastically. We may do another homebrew stream, maybe sometime when there are more people to actually tune in and watch. I'm thinking of shifting the time slot for this to something where people don't have as much going on. But anyway, you have fun, and I will see you tomorrow for the session.
See you then. Bye.
Bye. So then, let me give a brief bit of airtime once again to the crafting system, because I think this is a fantastic thing to get people excited for. I fully intend for this crafting system to be released into like an actual book that you can overlay over your game. I think it's a great way to get players involved in more like downtime activities, role play, give their characters more reason to have tool proficiencies, because like right now a lot of the time it's just like, oh hey, look at that, my background gave me proficiency in smith's tools, and I don't know why, and it's nowhere in my backstory. So let's talk about that for a sec. Now, the crafting system that I am building is still in the very early stages, but I can talk about the framework of it. So the concept is that in addition to your main class, your combat class essentially, which is really what all of the classes in D&D are currently, you would also have crafting classes. Now these wouldn't take up any of your levels, your 1 to 20, nor would they impede your ability to get other crafting classes. You could have as many crafting classes as you want, but they level independently between 1 and 10. And so you'd have ones like chef, cook, whatever you want to call it, smith, leatherworker, woodcarver, any of the tool sets that you can imagine, and possibly more that you want to put into your campaign. This framework would allow that. Now, talking about the items themselves, crafting the items themselves, if you take a look inside the player's handbook and you look at your equipment tables, for example, you have a pretty simple list. The idea, of course, with 5e was to keep things simple, to keep things generic, and therefore to allow you to add as much complexity as you want in your own campaign, to keep things nebulous so that it didn't limit you to particular settings. So anything that you would find in the player's handbook, this would be considered a basic level. But for most types of crafting, there would be 4 levels. You would have your basic, your advanced, your expert, and your masterwork. And the masterworks are really the ones that people are gunning for. So the basic level, the gold cost in the book, is accurate. But additionally, in shops and craftable by your players would be the higher levels. And these add small effects, like, for example, in the case of weapons, it's very simple. Now, it'd be far too powerful to have them be a +1, +2, +3 weapon, because if you've ever looked into enchanted items, you'd know that the recommended prices for something like a +3 weapon can go like 16,000 gold. And, you know, if you're looking at a battle axe, that starts at 10 gold pieces. So, you know, a bit of a jump there. So instead, the tiers function something like your basic items are straight out of the book. So if you were to craft a basic battle axe, it would deal 1d8 slashing damage. However, if you were to manage to craft an advanced battle axe, it deals 1d8 + 1 slashing damage. And for the expert tier, the same is true. It is 1d8 + 2 slashing damage. Yeah, I feel that this is a lot less overpowered than a +1 or +2 to hit. And then, of course, when you hit the masterwork tier, that's when you get the +1 to attack and damage. In addition to that, if you manage to hit the masterwork tier when crafting items, it would give you the ability to choose from a list of properties, essentially, that you could apply to the weapon. You would get a, and I'm not certain yet if I want to make it a roll or if I want to make it based on your previous checks, but you would have a way of determining how many properties you could add on to this, and in this way, masterwork items also become unique. Each one that you craft is unique. Now, the way that this works is for any crafter, you have to have the tool set that you're attempting to craft with. So say that you wanted to get into smithing, say that you wanted to make weapons, then you pick up the smith's toolkit. Now, if you're not proficient, you have to find a way to gain proficiency in it. You need to be proficient in it to actually start crafting anything other than basic. You will not be able to craft anything more than that. Once you gain proficiency in the toolkit, you are considered level 1 in that crafting class. And if you gain expertise, you gain another level for free. For the... Well, no, let me backtrack a bit, sorry. Now, rather than when crafting an item, having the player select, for example, the tier that they're attempting to craft, we're going with a system that instead, you select the item that you are attempting to craft. You have a list of resources, and a gold cost for each and for all of them combined. So typically it'll be about half the price out of the book. So using the battle axe again as an example, it is 10 gold pieces as a sale price. So it would cost 5 gold pieces in materials. You provide these materials, and you put in the amount of time, which as yet are undefined. And there are a list of 4 DCs. The lowest DC for crafting an item is the basic version, and the next one is advanced, expert, masterwork. Rather than selecting one of these to aim for, instead, what you do is you roll, and whichever DC whatever the highest DC that you surpass is, meet or surpass, that is the level of item that you create. So we've actually begun to build this list of DCs, as well as a system for how to build your own so that you can, of course, insert items into the game without having to worry about confusion. So let me get back to... So the battle axe, in particular, the lowest DC is 21, and then the next is 27, then 33, and then 39. Now, of course, I know what everybody is thinking. That sounds impossible, and that's kind of the point. A level 1 character in a crafting class should not be able to reasonably hit a masterwork item. They would have to pull off some pretty insane stunts in order to do that. And since they're just beginning into the field, basic should also be achievable but difficult. Now, of course, in addition to the materials that you have to provide, there's an amount of time that you have to devote to the task. During the time period that you devote to the task of creating this thing, you make a number of rolls with another DC. Not a final crafting DC, but we don't have a name for it yet. A crafting DC nonetheless. And each time that you surpass this, it lowers all of those DCs by 1. So the 21 would drop to a 20 instead, and the 27 would drop to a 26. So, say you get 4 of those rolls, you succeed all of them, so you drop the 21 all the way to a 17, and then you make your final roll, you add your proficiency in the smith's tools, and if you succeed, then maybe you surpass the basic version. Congratulations, you have a basic battle axe. Maybe you were super lucky and you got the advanced version. Excellent for a level 1 character, that's great. Now the question is, of course, how do you reach these super high DCs for Masterwork and for Expert? Well, there's some elegant solutions that we are putting into this. For one, your crafting class reduces the DCs at a 1-to-1 rate, which means that if you are, say, level 5 in Smith, all of those DCs drop by 5, so the 21 instead becomes a 16. Much more easily achievable, and that means that you can more easily produce the advanced versions on average. But in addition to this, all of the crafting classes are going to have abilities, features that they gain at each level, just like combat classes, but instead of being combat abilities, they're going to be entirely focused on crafting, on reducing those DCs, and perhaps providing reducing costs, maybe providing a little bit of extra flavor to particular things that they can produce, allowing them to produce more things, reducing the gaps between the DCs, stuff like this, which makes it easier to produce these Masterwork and Expert items as you go on. That was a lot of rambling, so I'm sorry if I talked your ear off. If you have any questions about it, please go ahead and ask now. I've talked pretty much all I can about that subject because, like I said, it is still in the process of being built. There's a lot of work to be done and a lot of questions we're asking ourselves that we don't yet have the answers to. Hello, Brian. Welcome to the rant. You missed me talking about a fantastic crafting system that I'm building for D&D 5e, which, since you missed it, I am currently in the process of building a homebrew system that can overlay the main and give people crafting classes in addition to their combat classes, making the toolkits a lot more usable and interactive. And also profitable, which is a big thing for adventurers. Oh, here's another fun fact, actually, that I can throw in. Something else that we decided. So, a lot of this crafting stuff is going to be done during downtime, certainly. There are also things in here like I said, each item will have a simple list of ingredients Like for a battle axe, it might be iron or metal, leather straps, and a haft. And the haft, rather than having a haft, because like there would be a wooden shaft that the battle axe is attached to, rather than putting that in there, we would put what's called generic woodworking generic wood carving item. And generic wood carving item is any simple item that is a part that could be considered a part of projects for other disciplines. So generic woodworking item could be the haft for battle axe, or well, you get what I mean. So, when working on smithing projects or other kind of more complex, yes, it does. And woodworking, of course, has its own class. Also, hello.
Hey, buddy. What's going on?
I didn't see you join. Welcome.
It happened not too long ago.
Fantastic. Yeah, when I'm in streamer mode, Discord doesn't notify me, so...
that would be why.
But anyway, continuing on with what I was saying, I got really distracted. The whole point, the cool point that I wanted to get down to is, in certain projects you'll be wanting to produce a lot of these generic items, and you obviously don't want to spend the time making multiple rules for each of these. What if you want 10 of them? Well, there is something allowed in the crafting system and building called taking the average. Fantastic for higher tiers when you want to produce a lot of particular things, or maybe just want to make a bunch of money during downtime but not have to roll for any of it. Again, as you level up, the DCs reduce, and so say you get to the point where you have a +5 in your smith's tools and you are a level 6 smith, and so the DC is automatically dropped on the battle axe to 15. Fantastic. That means that on average you'll succeed on the 15. So you want to produce 10 battle axes and go and sell them to make a bit of cash. Awesome. You just note that you've spent that much time and you say, I'm taking the average. Fantastic. You have 10 basic battle axes. No rolls necessary. Oh, yes, Brian, I am now reading your comment here. So it sounds like an undertaking and a half. I tried adding some mechanics to D&D and gave up halfway through because of how badly D&D is designed and how many mechanics I had to fundamentally change to make it work. I hear a lot of people say this. I'll repeat what I said before. D&D 5e is a very pared down system, the whole point of which is to make things streamlined, to make things simple and easy, where lots of mechanics, like the core of lots of mechanics, are reused in multiple forms so that they're easy to learn. In addition to that, they have like really small tables of items, a lot of them with generic names, and the whole point is leaving it as open as possible without, being too nebulous to function, to allow you to build your world out from there. I will say that in some instances this does make it difficult to work with adding your own mechanics. And a lot of people, when you try, will just look at you and say, well, just use a different system. Like, cool, well, this system has that, so why don't you just use that? I, however, would maintain that 5e is still one of the most accessible systems to people. It's one of the most well-known. There's tons of content out there that people can watch so that they can learn it without having to play at the table. It's the easiest, the most widespread, and the most known. and often the most comfortable for people, or even nostalgic. So I wouldn't say that it's a bad system, and I wouldn't say that it is overall poorly designed, although it does have its flaws, and I do have annoyances with it.
It's not the least complicated, but it is
Yeah.
one of the least complicated, and that makes it very easy to adapt and change, and kind of warp to be whatever you want it to be.
Absolutely. And yes, Brian. Fantastic. I am always in awe of people that can write their own systems. I started, I tried, and then I stopped because I am very ADHD, and that was a lot to handle, even for my ambitious tastes. I might eventually actually get back to that, but I feel like, I mean, so the whole point of these streams at their root is usually, with the exception of today, to talk about my homebrew world of Vanis, to allow everybody to ask me questions about the world, to familiarize people with it, because eventually I would love to actually like publish this setting. It is something that is filled with lore that I put a lot of love into over these past 5 years and continue to. And I want to share it with people. If I never make it to publishing a book, fine, so be it. As long as people get to see fragments of it, as long as people get to have a taste of it. If I do make my own system, I have other plans for a completely different world. That would not be this one. Number crunchy to the insanity. Alright. Well, as somebody with severe ADHD, I actually sometimes enjoy number crunchy aspects. So, and so does my friend who is just on here, Cadre, one of my players. He entirely redesigned, although in a very unbalanced format that definitely needs to be redone, the shard system. And it was super number crunchy. Instead of like having defined DCs and numbers, or like, well, it was a D6 system. You rolled a number of D6s, and like 4 through 6 was a success, 1 through 3 was a failure, 6s exploded, and you got to roll those again, that kind of thing. He rewrote like the whole spell casting system, and it worked entirely off of formulas. It was, you had like I can't remember what he called them, but in Arcana, like one of 4 that you chose, and then you mixed it with one of 7 types of God, I can't remember, like disciplines, essentially. And depending on your levels in those, there was a formula that you followed, and that formula might be modified by other like features that you had. And the problem that we bumped into with that was combat in the system would last like 2 or 3 rounds and 4 hours. Because we would literally, anytime somebody went to cast a spell, we would have to spend 30 minutes doing magic theory about how these two things could potentially work together to make the thing that you were trying to do. And then set, you know, the negative that it would be at, and then run the formula. 5 D100s. Good God, man, you're insane. Anyway. By the way, I don't know how I should address you on stream. Would you like me to address you as your real name or as your character name?
I don't care, man.
Okay, I'm just
Tell me
gonna call you
whatever.
Vaughn then.
Sure.
Thank you for joining the stream. The topic, I don't know if you saw, is of course Homebrew and how to build it. Um, any input that you might have on the subject, or questions that you might have for me?
Um, hmm. When I approach creating homebrew stuff, I generally look to try to incorporate either my players' ideas or I try to, because when I come up with stuff on my own, I tend to make stuff that's ludicrously broken. So I try to either incorporate my players' ideas or try to strive for balance over other things.
Right.
Because, I want there to be like a level of power in the party that is manageable, so you don't steamroll everything I throw at you.
So you can
Um,
actually kill us.
I I I've only ever killed I think a couple, two maybe,
Too, yeah. Doesn't mean that you haven't kept
but
trying, though.
I mean, I guess yeah. I throw like encounters that I feel are balanced too hard, and
Mhm.
so far you guys have steamrolled right through. That last encounter was supposed to be way harder than it was because my necromancer had greater invisibility that she never got to use, sadly.
Ah.
Um, there was never like a good time for it, or there was always like a um, in retrospect I should have used it at an earlier point. It would have changed the fight a lot. But anyway, I digress. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
I have a lot of those retrospect moments in my
yeah,
campaign.
that's the human condition.
Yeah.
But yeah, when I make a piece of homebrew content, I like to try to make it cool. But after I make it cool, I go back and I look at it and I go, "Will this break my game?"
Yeah.
And oftentimes the answer is yes. If I apply enough fuckery to it, which I have to because if I don't, the players will. So
Yep. Players are a finicky and unpredictable species.
oftentimes.
Oftentimes. Most of the time. All the time. It's mine. I'm very creative, and mine still surprise me with stuff that I haven't thought of. Like, oh wow, yeah, you can do that. Well, dang it, I hadn't prepared for this eventuality.
Yeah, and a lot of times my players will come to me with homebrew content, and I'll look at it and I'll go, hmm, this looks all right. Let me compare it to other stuff. Oh no.
Right?
Oh, this
Yeah.
is really,
Of course,
you
it's
know.
always wise, like when building items or spells, to look at stuff of the same or similar level, and be like, wow, this is way beyond the limitations of that. Um, Brian, yes, I wholeheartedly agree with that. Let's see, you said I did plenty of homebrew because I really dislike taking pre-built stuff, and in my experience, the best homebrew is always based around one basic question. What if blank action blank, which should then be followed by, oh, can you action with blank? I talked about this a little bit earlier, of not trying to solve problems that are already solved. Um, there's nothing necessarily wrong with, making something that can do the same thing but in a different way. Flavor is fun. Accessibility is fun. Maybe the thing that can be done can only be done by a very specific combination of like subclass and spell. But you make this a feature, okay, fantastic. Then it becomes more accessible. But yeah, starting with a problem, starting with a thing that you want to do, is always a great way to build homebrew. Earlier I was talking about the alternate magical inspiration that we wrote for my campaign, for the bard who does not like spell save DCs. I'm trying to think if I have other examples.
I have an example of some homebrew fuckery that was brought to me recently. Where do I post things here? Just wherever.
In the server,
Yeah.
you can post them in. If it's homebrew in particular, I have a section for homebrew. The stream will not be able to see it, but I can read it off.
Okay, sure. It's not like super crazy. Where is it?
Sure.
Well, it's a little ridiculous.
And Brian, that is a that's a great thing. That is what you just said, Brian, is kind of like the whole concept of the living lore streams. Is people ask me questions, and this helps build my world. Because even after 5 years of working on this, there are still tons and tons and tons of holes in my world, questions that haven't been asked, and therefore answers that haven't been produced. This is also why I love running. Currently, I only have one active campaign in my world, because it's all I really have the time for. But it's why I love people building characters in my world. Because the way that I work, in my campaign, to make my players really feel like they're a part of the world, whenever somebody makes a character to participate in my campaign, I produce for them a knowledge sheet, all of the things that their characters would know. And so as part of that, we start to ask the questions of, okay, where is your character from? Great, okay, so then what would they know about the culture there? What's their family like? Why are they like this? Why is their family like this? This is how the culture of the Ambalarna Republic and of the continent of Lavalon as a whole came about, because for Lavalon we have a moon elf player, and in her creating her character and asking all of these questions, by asking the questions to me, I was put on the spot and I created the answers, and that made Lavalon. Yeah, exactly. Which is why I'm always excited to have new players, or even just like, I have considered, I don't think this is feasible at my current level of followers, but in the future, I would love to have streams where I let viewers build characters in my world. We ask those questions, and although those characters may never necessarily appear in my world for real, it's the act of asking those questions, those particular questions, that really helps with the creative process. Nafon, I'll get back to you. You posted it
In the Humber thing.
Cantrip Caster. I think I've actually come across. This is yours?
No, absolutely not.
Oh,
no.
gotcha.
But what's his name? Izal brought this to me, and he's like, "Hey, Eldritch Blast." And I was like, I don't know if this is good. I don't know that I like this, because then he can also take some other stuff to make Eldritch Blast stronger, and he's already like basically only Eldritch Blasting. And I am nothing if not a fan of diversity in player action.
Yeah. It's you don't want to do something that makes like the only reasonable thing to do. Ooh, that's something that I'll talk about in a second. Like where one action is like the only thing that is reasonable just because of its power. Let me double back to that. But the thing that we're talking about is a homebrew feat called Cantrip Caster. Prerequisite: the ability to cast one or more cantrip spells. When you cast a cantrip that requires you to make a ranged attack roll, the cantrip's range is doubled. If a non-damaging cantrip has a range of touch, you can instead cast it with a range of 30 feet. If a cantrip you cast deals damage, it deals extra damage equal to your spellcasting modifier for that cantrip, if it is not already being applied. When casting a cantrip with a casting time of 1 action, you can choose to cast it twice instead of once as a single action. When you use this feature, you cannot cast another spell until the start of your next turn. Once you use this feature, you must finish a short or long rest before you can use it again. Yeah, so I can definitely see how that could be finagled into really skewing the balance.
Yeah, when you add on the other Eldritch Invocations, I think they're called,
Yeah.
that modify Eldritch Blast, it gets real fucky real quick. Because he's
Yes.
already doing 2d10, that adds plus, because it's 2 blasts, it adds plus 10, plus 5 twice, right? And then also, it allows him to do it twice in one turn, similar to like an action surge. And it makes his range 240 feet.
Ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which I think there's an Eldritch Invocation that can increase the range even further, right?
Yeah.
So that would be insane. And I'll get to your comment, Brian, in just a moment. But what is it that I was going to say? Oh, right. Making particular actions the only thing worth taking. So this was a problem that we hit in our Wednesday campaign, where we are both players. In our Wednesday campaign, my character is a spellcaster, and as like part of their backstory and their theme, my DM had provided me with certain spells, celestial magic, that all of them were homebrew, and all of them were always prepared for my character. And these I have a chance, but not a guarantee, to learn every time I level up and gain new spell slots. Anyway, the issue was they were meant to be a little bit more powerful than like regular spells of that level, but one of them in particular, a 3rd level spell, it got to the point where I felt like I was forced to cast this in every combat because it was too good to not do it. 3rd level spell, it threw down this like glowing area, concentration for 1 minute, and during that minute, any oh gosh, what was it? Any enemy of my any enemy of my choice that started their turn there had to make a saving throw, or take 3d4 radiant damage. And any allies within the radius got like 3d4 healing at the start of their turn. So it was incredibly powerful, and to the point where like I had other concentration spells on my list, but I could never use them because I'm like, well, I have to have this going. You never want to create like or give something to a player or create something that they can take that will cause that, because even though it's powerful, and you know, maybe you'll look at it and say, well, the power gamers will like that. I like power. I hated that because it was super limiting to me. It's like I had haste on my list, but I can never use haste because then I'd have to break the thing that heals everybody and damages enemies. So let's see.
I don't know. I like to look at 3rd level spells as compared to Fireball, and if any of them are more powerful than Fireball, I know I've fucked up. Because Fireball is realistically like probably on the level of like a 5th level spell.
Oh, I wouldn't say 5th level, but I would.
It depends on how many you hit with it, but yeah.
I would say that it's verging on being 4th level. Okay, so Brian, you said freedom of roleplay is a really big reason why you dislike D&D. I like to call it performance-centered systems, since they really incentivize min-maxing and don't really allow you to roleplay, instead hard-focusing certain actions. I disagree with that, and I disagree that very strongly because of campaigns like mine, like the one that I run. I agree that the mechanics of the system, like the fact that your class is pretty much all features that are centered around combat, encourages performance-centered campaigns. But in campaigns like mine, roleplay is very strongly encouraged. There's a ton of lore in my world. The lore plays an important part. Discovery of the lore is important to progression. We have spent the last several months with only, let's see, I think in the last 3 months, my party has had a total of 5 combat encounters. And other than that, it has all been intersocial and political roleplay. The culminating event of this entire segment that they've been doing for the last 2 levels of their characters has been them trying to deal with a man in power in this city who is abusing his power, and they entered into almost the social game with him, collecting evidence against him, trying not to get caught, being watched by him, trying to elude him and counteract the accusations that he made against them, having to build allies and relationships, carefully word their social encounters so that they don't trip up and mess up their plans. It came down to setting a lot of allies in motion and then praying that I made the roles that they wanted for them. And this messing with their plans and them having to deal with it on the fly as they attempted to build and stoke a revolution to take this man out of power. And yes, I suppose that I would say that campaigns like mine are the exception.
Definitely true, but that doesn't mean that roleplay heavy campaigns like aren't common nowadays.
No, and I think they're growing a lot more common. I think that's fantastic to see.
Yeah.
And that's especially why I'm building some, like, my crafting system is I want there to be systems that you can layer over D&D that encourage roleplay, that encourage stuff other than combat.
Yeah, I don't know. My game tends to have a lot of combat in it, but we've had
Yes.
sessions where we do nothing but roleplay. And the game that we both play in is oftentimes like that, where we will go a place and try and figure out like what we're doing there for a very long time.
Yes.
Talking and really stuffing out the area before going into a combat with a bunch of stuff we can't handle. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it leads to, some fantastic moments and jokes. Like
all all
You're-
three of the campaigns that I currently play in actually are like that. So
yeah. So that's a good counter then. I'd say that while 5e certainly encourages the combat aspect, really like laser focuses its mechanics towards it, people find a way. The campaigns nowadays are usually, from what I've seen, focused on roleplay.
however,
Mhm.
there are also systems that are like where combat basically doesn't matter, like World of Darkness or Vampire.
Oh yeah.
That shit is that is intense.
Yes.
Intensely focused on roleplay. So that's like the other end of the spectrum. And if D&D 5e is somewhere in like the middle, then what would be
What
on
is
the
it?
other side? I don't know. The other side would be like any hack and slash, I guess. Where there's no thought whatsoever to roleplay or story, but nobody's really super interested in that. So
Gotcha. Brian, which comment were you talking about? Another comment above your rant? I am missing which one you meant. Oh, for one of the campaigns. Gotcha. Oh, right. Let's see. For one of the campaigns, I played in, my DM built a string of massive Dwemer cities above the abyss. I threw a wrench in his plans by creating a fully homebrewed assassin seductress drow who used illusions, serrated knives, and needles smeared with petrifying poison as a weapon, basically forcing him to write an entire section about the underworld. Fantastic. I love it. That's very me. That is very me. Vaughn knows. I threw my Cheshire class that I created into his campaign. Yeah. Oh, and I played a demigod as the other character. No, I'm sorry, not a demigod, an actual god, who was a cleric of herself.
A lesser
weak
god, like,
yes, a lesser god.
Yeah.
Yeah, Greek style.
I basically appropriated all of the Greek gods
Yeah.
because the last time that I had run a campaign, I had come up with a unique pantheon based upon ancient Sumerians, um, with all the like special, shiny, specific lore for each of them. And then that campaign lasted, I want to say, 5 sessions, something like that. So this time around, I just went with Greek gods, literally, blow for blow, all of the exact same.
Yep.
And it's lasted a while, so whatever, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd encourage you to at some point revisit your previous campaign. My world, I started from a whole new pantheon. It has a whole new pantheon of gods with very detailed lore about them. First time I ran the campaign, it lasted for about 5 sessions. Second time, same thing. Third time, finally got off the ground. And now has lasted for almost a year.
I see. I don't know.
No, I'm sorry. Oh, no, almost a year. Okay.
I put a lot of time into designing things for a couple days every week. For like 2 days, I want to say 2 or 3. Those are my planning days. For D&D already.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, I don't know.
Yeah, I had to cut back.
I don't know how much overlap there would be between these two events if I was to run another game.
No, I totally feel that. I had to cut back. I used to have a Friday game, and as much as I loved it, I had to cut something out to make time for streaming and filming videos and reviewing board games and writing my own campaign. I had a Sunday campaign too that I ran at home with roommates, and I had to cut that one out. Technically, that one is on semi-permanent hiatus. Brian, your character sounds horrifying. I'm just gonna leave it at that. Yeah. Anyway, we're getting close to the time when I typically wrap up. I usually close things out at 7, so we have another 13 minutes or so. I will put forward the question to anyone in the chat. Any questions for me? And these don't have to be on topic. The prompt is still Homebrew and how to write it, but it can be anything about D&D in general. It can be anything about my world. I do particularly love talking about my world. A brainwashed underworld assassin. Yes, well, she would be terrifying, wouldn't she? I mean, to be fair, I've written well, no, because she's a good guy. City of Mist system. I have not touched that one. Vaughn, you sound like you know. You want to answer?
Yeah. The City of Mist system is something that my other group that I play a Saturday game in is looking at, that Ferdinand runs,
Mm-hmm.
he's looking at doing that after we get out of Cholt, out of I forget what it's exactly called, but it's the one that takes place in Cholt, right? He's running a game for us. He's looking at the City of Mists, and it's really this kind of like noir esque system where, or setting rather, where you go in as this character that you have an idea of. For instance, you could want to play as like Hercules, right? And
Hmm.
your character wouldn't exactly be Hercules, but you would have this character selected, right? And then you'd go, for example, your modern day character would go on like 12 different trials to prove himself. Um, so your character's actions kind of like follow that of what would happen to your original character, your concept, right? I'm doing a poor
Interesting.
job of explaining it. It didn't grasp my my attention, so I didn't learn a whole lot about it. But that's what he's looking at running for us after my time in Schultz is through.
Well, that's interesting. It almost reminds me of. Well, it did when you started talking. I think that it deviated from what I was thinking of. But it slightly reminds me of the cipher system, which I do have right here.
Not
The
familiar with them.
the cipher system is great. Talk about customization. The Let me find the thing that I'm looking for. So, when creating a character in the system, what you do when creating a character is there's not a class, there's not a subclass. You do. This is the formula. It is I am a adjective, noun, who verbs. Right? So, for example, I am a rugged warrior who controls beasts, or I am a charming explorer who focuses mind over matter. And each of these things, the adjective, the noun, and the verb, all of those three things tie into the abilities that you get. Versatility. Each character is so uniquely different because of that, and then you have different flavors that you can apply. That the GM is like, okay, well, our campaign is this flavor. It is fantasy, it's sci-fi, it's modern, it's grimdark, and that will, maybe change only the aesthetics of the abilities, or you might work together to like piece out parts of the abilities and put in new ones that fit the setting. And yeah, Brian, I definitely agree. I haven't used the cipher system yet, but I've read through a lot of this book, and it is fantastic. It's also a great way, actually, to kind of get ideas about other systems, because it's so pared down and simple. I mean, I've already had inspirations for my own campaign based off of this. Like, it's like difficulty tiers have kind of helped me to understand, like, oh, well, that makes sense in a D20 system. Those different numbers are like those different levels of difficulty. It's great. I love it. Anyway. All right.
The entire time I've been in here, I've been looking for more corrupted forest maps.
Great.
There aren't many.
For maps to kill ourselves on? Thanks.
There aren't nearly as many as you'd think there would be. As many good maps, I should say. I might have to make some.
There's never anything of the thing that you want to find. That's how it works. Unlocked plots and improv. Interesting. I mean, I know a lot about improv. Or do I know about improv? It's just a skill that you really have to develop in running a campaign. Although, with my Saturday campaign, I've gotten fairly good at predicting, like, directions that my players will go. It's... Once you sit with, like, the same characters for a while, it... and you know their motivations, it becomes easier to, know what you need to prepare for. But there's always those moments where they surprise you. I have no idea what unlocked plots are, though.
I think he means like not not railroading, like
Oh,
you
like
can
open
go
world
on.
stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Go on big tangents and stuff.
I mean, I'll just put it out there. I write plot, obviously. There is, like, overarching plot going on in the world. And there's a plot that the players follow, but only for as long as they want to. And they are the drivers of this train, so to speak. I will continue to lay down the tracks ahead of them, but if I want to get off of them at any point, I will make new ones. They can... I do not railroad my players. I will never say that you cannot do this. But that doesn't mean that there aren't consequences for not doing something. That doesn't mean that there are consequences for not doing something. Like, for example... they're about to go and track down the Cult of Noct. It's one of the character's main goals, is to track down and put down the Cult of Noct in Salika. And at any point they could just say, no, I want to go to Kinra instead. But then there's the possibility that in the background, okay, well, the Cult of Noct goes and succeeds in taking over Patal and finding the secrets that are buried there. There's also the possibility, they've met other heroes in this world. The Kynan tier exist. The Valkyrie squad exists. Maybe one of them steps in and deals with it instead.
Valkyrie squad.
Yes, the Valkyrie squad.
That's a great name.
Yeah, it's actually... I know it's cheesy. But also... it's, okay, but let me...
It's very 80s, I love it.
Let me explain this. The person in charge of it is is Rex from this campaign.
Really?
From my yes. A bit different than the Rex that you know from Maru's campaign. Azure is there as well. Very different from the Azure in Maru's campaign. Also alive, so that's a big difference. But there are others, and this idea actually, like, the idea for the Valkyrie squad existed before this world. It's one of those things where there are particular characters that in stories I tend to reuse. Kind of like Final Fantasy, and sometimes they'll change sometimes between stories. Kind of like Final Fantasy. Sometimes they'll only be like the name and the aesthetic, and that'll be the only thing that ties them together. Anyway. So
I just like their name.
Yeah,
this is a cool
Rex
map.
is cheesy. Unlocked plots is the idea that you build the most basic of skeleton plots, only fleshing out the web of connection between people and events, sprinkle in some cool set pieces, and let your players just go to town. I think that describes Vaughn's campaign very well.
Maybe. I run an open world campaign, which, if you don't have everything already down, is quite a lot to write in between sessions, which is what I do, because I suck at improvisation. But I do end up improving a lot of stuff. Yeah, I don't know. It's a whole thing.
Yeah, that's fair. Unlocked plots can be a boon and a bane. It really depends. Oh gosh, I'm trying to think of... I know where I was headed with that, but I can't remember.
Boon and a bane.
It's, right. Oh, yes. Just as easily as, you can like end up railroading your players by like writing a plot and then Deus Ex Machinaing things into, you know, they end up there somehow, whether they see that behind the scenes or not. Just as easily as you can get like locked into that, you can end up in a scenario with an unlocked plot where your players don't have a direction, and it can be frustrating for the players because you, the GM, can be sitting there and like, I know 20 things that they could be doing, but the players don't know any of them. And between maybe analysis paralysis of like, oh, great, so now there's too many decisions, I don't know where to go, or none of these have relevance to my character, or my character has no knowledge for any of these, and so I don't even know that you have these things that are prepared for us. You know, it can be just as limiting as railroading.
It is true.
Yeah.
I have run into that in the past.
A big grab bag of set pieces that you can just throw at them according to the situation. Yeah, that's true. That can be fun. Stuff that you can just whip out in an emergency. Yeah, I think that it would work better in detective-style stories. For something like D&D, it just feels too... Well, actually, for anything roleplay-based, sometimes it can feel a bit jolting to just, you know, grab something out of the bag and throw it in front of people, because it's like a big detour from like what was going on. It depends on how you implement it. But anyway, we are now at 7 o'clock, so I think that it is about time I wrap up this stream. It's been fantastic talking to everybody. Thank you, Vaughn, for coming to weigh in with your own thoughts. Thank you, Brian, for your consistent interaction. Been fantastic to chat with you both. Kadri's not here, but thank you, Kadri, for tuning in earlier to talk about the system. What was I going to say? Oh, yes, well, everybody, keep your eyes peeled, because I am going to be continuing working on that crafting system and a lot of other homebrew stuff. Some homebrew stuff I am going to be putting out for free. Most of it is going to be through my Patreon, some of it unlocked, some of it for subscribers only. Currently, I have up on patreon.com/thegrinninggamer the Etheric Transcriptor. That is accessible to my citizen tiers and above. It is a system for scroll crafting and for transmuting spells into other spell lists. It also has handy-dandy tables for costs of scrolls, for buying, selling, the materials to create them, the amount of time that it takes. So fantastic if you have a wizard in your party. I'm also putting out relic items, the touchstones, a lot of which are currently in playtesting. Playtest material is available to my... I forget the names of my tiers. Not noble. Counselor tier and above. There we go, thank you. And counselor tiers get to have feedback on them, let me know what they think, before they are released to the citizen tier in their final form. In their final form! Anyway. And of course, as always, my YouTube will be continuing to update with more board game reviews and the like. So everybody, stay tuned for more of that fantastic content. If you have suggestions, I have a suggestion box down on my page. Leave me suggestions, and I will look at them. Anyway, I will see you next time. Until then, keep grinning. Thanks very much.